My career started, I started at a toy retailer about 6.5 years ago now. When I started there, the business was at about 5 shops, still a growing business. And there was a CEO there and an owner there who's a very idealistic guy, a very creative guy, and had a lot of ideas that he wanted to start executing operationally within the business, but needed somebody to come in and actually help him do that. So I came in, as I said, about 5 stores at the time, and really got to work underneath him and spread myself across, every kind of leg and angle of the business. In my time there, I was there for about 5.5 years. We grew from 5 stores to 25 stores. We were a toy retailer as well, and so within that period, Toys R Us went bankrupt too, which was a really interesting period for us to kind of go through. We took 11 of their shops. And as I said, I think, throughout my 5.5 years there, never really had a niche kind of area that I was a specialist in within that business, but really got to spread my wings across that entire business and learn what it looked like, A, to work under somebody who was exceptional, and B, what it looked like to scale a business from, quite small to quite significant in a short period of time as well. And yeah, I guess from there, as I said, with that Toys R Us bankruptcy, not only did we take 11 of their shops, but we took a lot of their staff as well. And so for me, I went from being somebody who was a leader in that business and quite a high level management role, in an operational sense, to somebody who was far less experienced to the people that we had brought into the business. Obviously, a few of the big guns from Toys R Us. That in turn kind of led me to being pigeonholed in an area of the business that I wasn't so fond of. And yeah, being an ambitious person, I decided that was time to take a step and to leave the business. From there, I got introduced to a guy named Daniel Hakim through a friend of mine. And Daniel is the CEO of a business called the Club of United Business. We call it CUB for short. And essentially what we do, we're a community for Australia's top entrepreneurs and business owners. And what we do is we bring in, these owners of these businesses, and then we actively facilitate relationships between them. So we facilitate meaningful relationships through, a number of different means. So, we'll do events, we'll do forum groups, we'll do one-on-one connectivities and whatnot. And that's basically where I'm at now. I've been there for about 18 months now. I'm in a director role, but my active role is called a membership manager. And so I'll both do the sales. So I'll talk to business owners on a day-to-day basis and see if there's a fit within the club. And then B, it becomes my job with, together with our team, to facilitate relationships between those owners and help them get value through the club. Yeah, so the best advice, I think, if I had to nut it down to one thing, obviously being in an environment now for the last 18 months where I am around, successful business owners all the time, I do get a lot of good advice. And so I think the one thing that came to mind was actually from Steve Grace, who connected us. And I guess being in my role, when you are around, really high level people and people who've built a lot of success, me personally, I've suffered from imposter syndrome quite a lot. You feel like you're in this room with all these really successful people, and you don't really feel like you deserve to be there. And I had a conversation with Steve about this, and he said to me, mate, I've been in business, 30 years plus. I've sold 2 big companies. I've done a lot, and I still experience that every single day. So get that out of your head right now, because what you have to say is as important as what anybody else has to say. Everybody's got different experiences in life, and your experiences are very different to somebody else's experiences, and that can bring value to somebody that you don't even know. So get that out of your mind right now, and get on with it. And so I've very much done that since he gave me that advice. And I think it just allows you to have the confidence to go into these things and have these conversations with people who are much further along on the journey than you are, but in a confident way, I suppose. And I guess, that advice might change in value to me over time. But I guess at my stage of my career, that was something that I found hugely valuable. I think what I would have loved to have known when I first started was that hard work and consistency can trump intellect. And I think the reason I say that is because when I first started at Toymate, which was that first business that I spoke about, I dropped out of university to pursue that role and to pursue that job. And so, being 21, 22 years old at the time, a lot of my friends were at university. They were getting these degrees. They were doing, great things in an academic sense. And that scared me at the time, because I didn't realize that actually going into a business and getting that experience was going to hold me in good stead going forward. And so I think that might have held me back a little bit. It might have, tainted my confidence a little bit in those early stages. And I think if I had known back then that the hard work and the consistency was the most important thing for me personally, I could have, accelerated my growth at an earlier stage. A very specific mistake, but it leads to a bigger lesson, I suppose. During my period at Toymate, again, I talk about that a lot because that's where I was for the majority of my career so far. There was a stage when there was a thing called a fidget spinner. I don't know if you remember the fidget spinner, but the fidget spinner went absolutely gangbusters worldwide. It was just one of those things that, just completely takes off. And there was a worldwide shortage of stock. Nobody could get stock worldwide. My boss at the time, his biggest skill, I always thought, was in his buying. He was a very skilled buyer, and he managed somehow to get his hand on about 100,000 fidget spinners when there was a worldwide, shortage of stock. Nobody could get stock. And so we decided at the time to set up a little pop-up business between the two of us. We decided to open up, I think we had 12 or 13 pop-up stores around Sydney. He was going to give me 25% equity in that business. He would fund the whole thing. I had the 25% equity, and I had to just go and run the business, basically. And so I did. I put together this whole kind of little business that we had, this little operation. As I said, 12 or 13 stores across Sydney. We had 2 or 3 staff at each location. And it was my job to make sure that everything was running smoothly and that the finances and the profits and whatnot were all in check. What happened was, over the course of the month, at the end of each day, I'd obviously have to tally things up and, take the profits and whatnot. And I was doing a lot of the work on the balance sheet, but I wasn't actually counting the cash. And towards the end of the month, when we checked our profits, we were about $10,000 or $15,000 short. That obviously was not a very, it wasn't a really enjoyable conversation to have with my boss at the time. We ended up going through it in strong detail and kind of balanced it up a little bit more. We didn't end up losing that much money. But the lesson I learned there was attention to detail. I think, if you don't pay attention to detail and you don't pay attention to these little things that kind of accrue over time, you'll end up making real big mistakes that can lose a lot of money or hurt people or, whatever it might be. And I think from that day onwards, I've really learned to just pay attention to the small things, and those small things add up incrementally into really big things. I think it's three key traits. The first one is patience. I think especially when you come into a small business, whether you're the owner of that business or you're somebody who's trying to drive that business forward, you don't get the quick paydays. You don't get paid big salaries right off the bat. And it can be frustrating, especially when you're younger and, your friends are working in these big corporates or whatever it might be, and people are getting paid a lot more than you are. It can be frustrating. And it can be, I think if you don't have that, if you don't look through the right lens, you can make stupid decisions based off short-term gains. So I think I've stayed the course. I've really stayed patient throughout my career. I've backed myself and I've backed the businesses that I've been a part of. And I think, it started to pay off towards my late 20s. The second thing that I put down was accountability. So, my old boss always used to say to me that it actually annoyed him how well I took criticism. I think if you're unable to take criticism and if you're unable to take accountability of your mistakes, there's nothing worse than somebody who makes excuses and isn't able to take ownership of the things that they do wrong, as well as the things that they do right. So I think I've always taken accountability of all areas of my career and my work life, and I think that's always held me in good stead, and had people respect me for it as well. I think people respect you when you take accountability. The third thing, and I think probably the most important thing from my point of view, was throwing myself into as many uncomfortable situations as possible. So, I look back to my early days at Toymate. I had to go out and train, management staff and staff of 25 to 30 people at 21, 22 years old with no retail experience, operational experience whatsoever, on different operational systems and whatnot. That was really uncomfortable at the time. But you throw yourself into that kind of thing and you grow from that. I can fast forward at 5 years when I joined Cub, and obviously being in a sales role, I have to pitch to high-level CEOs and business owners every single day, and so that can be really daunting. These are really smart people. You're trying to sell them something that they might not necessarily straight away see the value in. That's a daunting situation. Or sitting at a table with 10 or 15 or 20 high-level, execs and CEOs and business owners, and having to, essentially chair a conversation or public speak in front of groups of people and whatnot. All these things to me aren't things that came naturally, and aren't things that I was comfortable with by any means. But I think when you do throw yourself into those uncomfortable situations, they end up in time becoming comfortable, and I think that's how you grow.